It started in tragedy a bit, a plane crash. Katie was 15 pounds at 5 years old, and she kept losing weight. And so I was desperate. If you look at Elmer's glue back in the 1940s and 50s, the main ingredient in Elmer's glue was casein. This was my greatest achievement, right? Just getting it to market was crazy. If the whole world is running one way, I think that it's ripe for disruption to break in the medical industry. That is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm going to go grab territory with an incredible team, and I'm going to be one of the fastest growing companies to $100 million.
Hi, I'm Mike Gelb, and this is Consumer VC, where we talk about what it takes to invest in and build scalable and iconic consumer businesses. If you're liking the show, please subscribe on whichever channel that you're listening to this show on. And subscribe to the newsletter at theconsumervc.com. You'll get a weekly roundup email that covers all the latest fundraisers and launches that are happening in consumer, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Our guest today is Richard Laver, who is the founder of Lucky Energy. He founded Lucky Energy with the goal of creating a cleaner alternative to the current energy drinks on the market. Previously, he founded Kate Farms, which are baby formulas made of powerful plant-based nutrients without common allergens. He founded Kate Farms in order to save his daughter's life, which you will learn about. Something we also discussed on the show that we didn't directly address, so I think it's important to directly address because we bring it up multiple times, is the plane crash. So when Richard was 12 years old, he survived a plane crash that killed 137 people, including his dad, who was sitting right next to him. This was part of the inspiration behind starting Lucky Energy. And recently, Lucky Energy raised a $14 million Series A1 led by Lavar. There's a lot we get into on this show. We talk about his path to entrepreneurship with Kate Farms and his daughter, how he scaled that business, why he ultimately left that business, what he thought was interesting about energy drinks, and his approach to brand building and launching new products. There's a ton here, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor, Highbeam. This show is brought to you by Highbeam, the all-in-one finance platform built specifically for consumer brands. If you're running a D2C or omnichannel brand, you know managing cash, payouts, inventory, and vendors isn't just back office work. It's core to the business. Most banking platforms weren't built for that. Highbeam combines no-fee banking, automated treasury in order to maximize yield on idle cash. They also offer flexible credit, bill pay, and a live 13-week cash flow. Highbeam combines no-fee banking, automated treasury to maximize yield on idle cash, flexible credit, bill pay, and live 13-week cash flow, plus AI agents that automate tedious manual spreadsheet work. Think fast answers to ad hoc sales and finance questions, cash flow forecasting and scenario modeling, benchmarking, and much, much, much more. Brands like Bird Dogs, New York or Nowhere, Ridge, and Avocado use Highbeam to stay on top of their finances and scale without hiring a full team. Build your brand, keep your cash. Check out highbeam.co to sign up. The link is also located in the show notes. And sign up today for a free 3-month trial to their AI analysts. So without further ado, with all that being said, here's Richard. Richard, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Great. Glad to be here with you. And it's exciting to get out to talk with some of people in the industry and have heard about our companies, et cetera. So it's an exciting time.
No. Thanks so much for. I know you're a busy guy. You're in multiple places. Thanks so much for spending the morning with me, or at least my morning here in LA. I wanted to start a little bit about the founding story, about the founding journey with Kate Farms. Your daughter Kate was struggling to gain weight. Well, how did you create a formula yourself for Kate? And so walk us through a little bit about that. First of all.
It really goes back to how my life started, right? So it started in tragedy a bit, a plane crash. And so kind of how I got to the moment where I knew I needed to take action was really a culmination of things that happened after my plane crash, and how much loss I had in my life. And so when my daughter was sick, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy by the age of 5. She was diagnosed with failure to thrive. Failure to thrive is a blanket term the medical industry gives when they really don't know what's wrong with the person. Really, they're not dying on paper, but they could be dying, and they just blanket it with they can't get them to gain weight, or they can't get them to stop being sick. And so Katie was 15 pounds at 5 years old, and she kept losing weight. And so I was desperate. And what I learned was I was going to Whole Foods and I was seeing all this wonderful nutrition that everyone was eating, and Expo West and all these great companies and all these great things. And yet when I was in the hospital setting, I couldn't introduce these beautiful vegetables to my daughter. Like there was no delivery system for her because she had lost so much weight. She was now placed on a tube. And so I knew that that phytonutrients, superfoods, is what gives us the basis for health, that keeps autoimmune disorders at bay. Yet, until me, no one really had put in all these superfoods into a shelf stable drink. So prior to that, before I had aspirations to start a company, um, my daughter, I felt was going to die. And so what, why that was so urgent was that, from the plane crash and surviving that, I understood that life was so precious, and that as a child, you're not supposed to understand that one day you're here and the next day you're gone. But that was given to me at a young age. And so when the doctors weren't taking real action, they were just putting her on different formulas. So Katie went through about 31 formulas, and each one of them started to get more and more problems, disease. Like she started to have bottle rot because she was throwing up the formula so much that her teeth would, from the sugar, were starting to decay. She was on a plethora of medications, and no matter how many calories they put her on, she kept losing weight. So the doctors didn't have a solution. So they were just kind of going by, like, we have bigger problems. Let's solve the big problems. So the big problem to me was my daughter. It was the food, I believed. And it was the formulas that she was getting. So I read a book called The China Study. And then when I put the China Study down, I really understood what was wrong with my daughter. She was um, basically, if you look at Elmer's glue back in the 1940s and 50s, the main ingredient in Elmer's glue was casein. That was the first thing. So that's milk, that's dairy, casein. So that caseinate was all Katie was drinking through these formulas in her tube. And as these formulas were being ingested, she wasn't walking, and she was in a wheelchair. She was wheelchair bound with her cerebral palsy. So a glue substance, mucus, was forming in her body. And what was happening after I read the China Study was, it was really clear to me, was that her absorption of these ingredients we were trying to get her to absorb, no matter how many calories we put her on, she kept losing weight. So this glue was forming in her body. So I wrote a paper called Tree of Life. And Tree of Life was this paper I wrote about. I went to senior citizen homes and I saw all these strapping men that were 200 pounds when they were young. And when they now were older men, they were eating the same calories, but they were just losing weight so rapidly they couldn't keep it on. So I had this theory that mucus was collecting in Katie's body. And as the allergens were getting more and more, she now was just throwing up all food. She just couldn't keep anything down. And so I went to the doctor and said, listen, I'm going to create a delivery system of superfoods from around the world. I had a belief that I believed in God, and I believed that God put on earth this simple idea. It wasn't a rocket science idea. If God was real, then he put all these wonderful things on earth for us to absorb. And so it was my job now to go around the country, the globe, and find these superfoods to put into a formula so that my daughter didn't need to chew and she could sustain life and be healthy. Well, I went to the blender, and about 90 days later, I came up with a formula and gave it to Katie, administered it. And 30 days later, she was off almost every medication and she was thriving. so, so I was elated.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. And I also do think it's interesting how there I think part of this kind of consumer health and wellness trend that's been, happening for years and years and years, I do think that it's consumers wanting to educate themselves and not just kind of trusting their doctors or trusting, the medical community. Not there's anything wrong with that at all. But I mean, this is like to the extreme, right? This is actually saving somebody's life,
Right.
right? Um, but it is also just like interesting as 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 this example is that so many other like consumers just in a much smaller way are taking their own account, taking their own agency in terms of their lives when it comes to health and wellness, too.
Yeah, it's dangerous in one sense, right? You don't we see like going back on Steve McQueen, took matters in his own hand and wanted to solve his cancer. So there's we definitely want to trust our doctors. Um, but there was just a dogma going around where doctors were I felt that they were focusing on uh, administering things to solve the problems. But if you looked at really what was going on is the they would a drug would solve a problem for something that the actual food was creating. And so it was just adding medication onto medication. And then when you looked at the portfolio of the ownership of these medications for these things, they were owned by the same companies that own the formula. So not to get too that's a huge rabbit hole, but the thing for me was it was to break it down to a very simple thing, which was I get to go to Whole Foods and I get to eat the greatest things in the world, and my and patients are had no access to those things. So when I put it into the mason jar, and it was called Kate's Cream, and I delivered it to school. Katie's thriving, she's happy, and my daughter's back, and she's literally gained 10 pounds in like 3 4 weeks. And this nurses came up to me at school and said, Richard, the board of California is going to come after you. You're not a doctor. You can't deliver her this food called Kate's Cream. It has to. And I said, well, why? It has to be sealed in an FDA, FTC government thing. And I understood that because they want to prevent caregivers from giving mad science to kids. But I had a proven solution. I gave it to 100 patients prior to this, and everyone got well, right? So I knew I was onto something, and I had no aspirations to start a business. So really, what I did was I brought Katie home, and I said, "Oh God, Katie wants to go to school." So I put her on one of their next new formulas, and she started getting sick again. So I went to the lawyer and said, "There's only one thing you can do, my man, is start a company." So that was it. And so I'd wanted to be successful and create all these things, but the mother of invention type thing, this was really how it was for me. I never thought we were going to make a dollar at it, let alone become the number one plant-based prescribed formula in the world.
So once you were kind of forced to make a business, have this be actually turned into a business to save your daughter's life and to have her keep gaining weight and be healthy, what from the business sense, what were the next steps? Was it because I mean, obviously you didn't stop just with your daughter, and as you said, you were also kind of serving at the time roughly 100 different patients. What was kind of the next step from that?
Well, the secret sauce really is, wannabe entrepreneurs or dreamers. They dream at night about creating this big thing and what's cool out there. And then the next day, yeah, it just kind of goes by the side when they see all the steps it's got to take. But it's interesting. That was very, very similar to me in my 20s ideas. I was the guy sitting up at night with you having ideas and stuff. But um, when you have to save your child, we say this all the time. If your child depended on it, you all of a sudden get very industrial and entrepreneurial and problem solving. And so the first thing first was I'm doing this. That's it, right? Like that's being done. So when there's a conviction, it's very interesting with investors or partners or employees or anyone. They can kind of sense your authenticity if you're going to be the guy that's going to do it. Like they know. There's a feeling of I've got to literally sign up everyone to do this project with me to bring it to commercial market. And so and I've got to get the line time from the production facilities. They've got to choose between a Tetra Pak at the time. There's like little line time, and everyone wants to do a Tetra Pak, and so they had to believe in you, and so I was the perfect guy at the right time to do it because I had a great story, and it was a true story. I had to save my daughter's life, and so who wasn't going to sign up for that? Next thing I had to do is get it to taste good because my first strategy to bring it to the medical market was really too hard to do because all the doctors, I had no doctor's degree. They were already ganging up on me that I wasn't going to break through. Even though Loma Linda, the hospital, was supporting me, it was going to be a hard thing to do. So my first strategy was let's bring it to retail and be the first plant-based ready to drink formula. But just to give you a sense of how hard this project was, from the time I decided to do it, it took me 2 years. 86 it ended up being 86 shelf stable ingredients to sustain life forever, right? That you don't ever need food again and have good blood work. No one had ever done it. It is really the most immaculate formula anyone's ever created, really. And I don't say that it was crazy how it was done. And just to put in perspective, I had 85 formulas until I succeeded shelf stable on number 86 and down to my last $1,000. So this was my greatest achievement, right? Just getting it to market was crazy.
Wow. So once you actually do have a shelf stable product, then how did you go about getting it into retail?
At the time, Orgain was a grass-fed company. They hadn't pivoted to plant-based. And it was the one good luck thing I had was the plant-based era was taking off. And so the only real scaled consumer product that had really become something was Vega, and they were out of Canada. And at the time, everyone was saying you couldn't take plant-based shakes and make them taste great. Like they were gritty. They were the big aftertaste. It was just tough, right? So I knew if I was going to deliver a high calorie, high carbohydrate product to market, which I wasn't going to get the yoga moms, right? And to begin with, it had to taste perfect. So that was part of the last year was I was the first person, I believe, really to get it to taste like Haagen-Dazs ice cream or without any aftertaste. And the achievement of that was crazy. So once I had the taste profile, I was able to knock down the doors of like Nature's Best, tell the story of why I needed to exist, and the fact that I was really the first commercial RTD plant-based shake in the world. So in other words, whole different thing that I'm coming after with Lucky. Going into an entrenched category with 100 billion. And what I'll tell you later is about how I said this is the biggest opportunity in the history of beverage. Different way, it was the best opportunity. But so we got our start, and having no one around as competition until Orgain came with their plant-based allowed us to really tell the story, get adoption, and start to move the product.
And so you're gaining traction. You're moving the product. What was your approach to raising capital? When did you start raising capital for Kate Farms?
Yeah, so this was what set me up for real entrepreneurial success, which was Tree of Life, the paper, the passion, the story was a medical story. And so that's where I needed to go, right? And so the margins of a product that I created, a Ferrari, without the thought of margins. And you'll learn later that how I've been so successful raising capital in the retail consumer market is that I have a real understanding of how I'm going to get profitable. Where back in the years 2013 to 2021, the growth company years, you could just find product market fit. You could have a great product, first time CEO, first time founder, et cetera. He'll find his way. The board will get around him. We'll find our way.
Scale.
Yeah. And now they want to know how you really tell me, how are we going to get to profitability for real? And the story behind that is is gross margin. So I had a bad gross margin. So I learned this was the first time doing it. And I had a real tough time with gross margin. So what I found out was I had applied for a code called B4150, which is the medical code. And I did that day one when I went into retail, and I got it. And then I'm struggling along trying to scale this protein company against Orgain, and Orgain started to go plant based, and he had all the Whole Foods and he had all this different stuff, and I sort of had this incredible movement of product with the sick, the elderly, people that really needed nutrition, and it would sell. But really, my TAM was going to be. That's another thing I learned, how I've been so successful with this company. It just wasn't that big in consumer retail. This was. Um, we were beginning to market companies to the Lululemon girl, and lower, a little bit lower in calories and carbohydrates, et cetera. So I knew I was going to have a hard time, and so I looked at my Tree of Life paper one night and started to think about, okay, we're going to start to pivot to the medical industry. And I got a code for a product with peptide, and it gave me a gross margin of 60%. And then Kate Farms was really on a rocket ship at that point. I got my community
Yeah.
of, and then I got a code that gave me investors a real reason to believe that at the time, you have to remember, plant-based companies like Beyond Meat, they had like 28% gross margin or 35, right? And it was like this era of these really fun companies, plant-based exploding, but no one was talking about how's this company really going to get to profitability. And that was the real education process of me for 2.0 of my career.
So eventually, with Kate Farms, just to skip ahead a little bit, you ended up raising 75 million Series C. Is that right? Um, and at that point, you decide, I don't know if it was then or maybe a little bit later, to actually step back away from Kate Farms. What was the reason?
The reason was because everyone hears when they see a Forbes article or something that Kate Farms was the ultimate love story of a father to a daughter. But Kate Farms was a rebel story. I was an angry dad that no one heard. I was a guy that was in a plane crash. My life was I was the unluckiest guy in the world, you thought. And really what was happening was I was the luckiest guy. All these horrible things that had happened to me were preparing me. And I think that my goal at Key Farms was two things. Number one, save my daughter's life. And number two, bring it to the masses. Like I really, I didn't want to necessarily like be the guy that's running this company 20 years later, and the company becomes who the founder is, like it's intertwined. I see myself as an artist, as an entrepreneur, perhaps. um I'm not interested in playing the whole political, trying to protect my moats of power, etc. I'm in it to win it for my shareholders, to bring it to the masses. And so, and the medical community is a pretty dry thing, but my story was a little more punk rock and roll, to be honest. It was a beautiful story of my saving my daughter's life, but I had something else that I wanted to tell all along. And so when I brought in Brett Matthews, who became um, co-CEO and then became CEO, and I brought him in, and no one asked me to kind of step down or do any of that stuff. It was just a matter of I needed to get back to my daughter, to love Katie. I saved her. And also my passion was brewing for something else, my final story that I wanted to tell.
No, that makes well, let's get into your final story. So for Lucky Energy, when did you at least have the idea of Lucky Energy that you wanted to start an energy drink company?
So I was in the Series C Goldman Sachs building on their floor, whatever it is, 57 or something. And I sat in my chair, and I kind of learned a lot of lessons. First of all, I underestimated my ability to be a CEO, and certain things I underestimated myself. I didn't know, I didn't have the experience, right? So I didn't know what my strengths were. So my strengths were I like to hire the best people in the world, build the team quickly, and put the company above my own interest, to really really get the best people around, and to infuse a culture of no politics in the culture, no corporate stuff. Really make sure the next guy hires the next guy up that could be potentially smarter than him. So there's these things that I knew that I really did well, and then I understood how to build a gross margin and how to move that forward to a profitability as a company. I also, as an artist, I wanted to tell the story of how a guy like me that came from nothing in tragedy could defiantly disrupt, and inspire other people that didn't go to the darkness, didn't have the lucky breaks, that they could do anything they ever wanted, and that their biggest failures were setting up. And the reason I felt that I wanted to go into the energy drink category was because the whole world was saying, why do we need another energy drink? And that's when I go, if the whole world is running one way, I think that it's ripe for disruption. Because what was really happening was same thing that happened at Cape Farms, which was all the legacy brand companies were creating the same iterations of formulas for 100 years. No one was breaking through to disrupt. In the energy drink category, everyone was racing to the moon with more caffeine, with more exotic stuff, more B vitamins, more things. And it was a very low grade to me in storytelling. There was this huge category that I could imprint on every single can, the story of never giving up, never quitting, and fighting back for your dreams. The story of the rebel, the person that's not the big networker, that has a story to tell, that has a product to tell to the world, that's sitting inside a building somewhere in the world. And I wanted to inspire them to do that and do it through a cleaner RX bar philosophy energy drink. Was when I say RX bar philosophy, which is 5 core ingredients, less is more. Let's get blue ocean strategy, people that are scared of energy drinks, into the category, and let's expand a modern day entertainment company through storytelling. And that's and attention getting in the beginning. That's why we put F word on the can in the first bit. I wanted to, like, people were coming, why would you mess with your legacy? You had this beautiful story. I go, you guys are missing it. The stories, I was the outsider. I was the angry, I was the person that didn't need approval to go make a formula for my daughter. And I wanted to tell the story that a cuss word on a can is not morality. Morality is what you do when no one's looking, and what you do in crisis in the biggest moments. You're going to jump into that burning thing, or are you going to be the philosopher that sits around and watches? So in other words, it was the perfect place for me to go. It needed a product story again. I believed energy. And it needed a great gross margin, which I believed. All these companies were sitting around burning for too long, and it just needed a better storytelling.
So once you have this idea and kind of a rough picture in terms of the brand positioning and the overall vision in terms of what you want Lucky Energy to look like, or at the time, Lucky F. What did you want for ingredients wise for the product? I understand that you took inspiration from RX Bar in terms of what they were able to do on the ingredient side, and also on the packaging too. Just very, very kind of simple in terms of what the ingredients are as well, and the kind of displaying or telling that through the story of RX Bar on their packaging. What ingredients do you want to use? For example, how did you think about using a co-man, or did you use a co-man? Finding the right manufacturer, or really just finding the right product that you actually wanted to create out of Lucky. What was that process in terms of building the actual product itself?
Yeah, so you have to have an ideation first, which was the ideation of why you need to exist, why you should exist, why you believe you should exist, is got to come from a belief system of something. And my first belief system was, from the world I come from, you can't build 100 million, let alone a billion, unless the story's great, product's great, execution's great, product market fit's great. Everything's got to be great in the organic world. Everything. For some reason, in the energy drink world, you had this crazy big category, but what was really happening was, uh, the market was looking for cleaner, less sugar, and there wasn't that much passion for a product. In other words, people would switch pretty easily. And that's, if you talk to Peter Rahal, he'll tell you that that's what he saw in the energy bar market. He'll tell you, you had 500 bars, but there was only like a couple. Like you get a gym bar over here, you go over here and get another bar. Like maybe you would be addicted to Kind Bar for a week, then you'd see it was a little bit, but like it was like there wasn't like lifelong Coca-Cola thing. And so that was my number one thing. It was like I felt like some of the leaders, I don't want to bring up the names, but they were winning because the other companies were just doing stupid thing. They were just winning a little bit of default. Not to put that down, but so I saw an opening that if I had Kate Farms type execution, I could win big quick. So that's number one. Number two, a lot of these new energy drinks were trying to go after the natural food world, and they couldn't scale because they were offering to, people want energy at the end of the day. They want energy. They want to feel good. Like that's what I offer. I didn't want to offer all these exotic vitamins, all these different things. So what I did is I took from my superfood world experience, I took maca. And maca is a Peruvian miracle. And in it, it's got your magnesium, your B vitamins. It calms your central nervous system. It's incredible for sexual health. And so this becomes the hero ingredient for your vitamin core. So what I did is I married the hopes and dreams of the energy drink, natural food world, energy drink companies that haven't necessarily been able to scale, and put it to the masses for the C store, gave them a little bit of an upgrade. Okay. Give them maca, give them ginseng. Taurine, I knew from my studies, was one of the greatest ingredients in the world for your brain. It got a bad rap for some reason because people were dosing it at these crazy high levels. So I right? So I was like, you felt jittery because what I wanted to do is give you one thing. I knew that I could hit pay dirt like I did at Cape Farms when I knew if I made it taste like Haagen-Dazs ice cream. If I could make you feel euphoric drinking my drink, clean, subconsciously, I wouldn't have to shout from the rooftop the product benefits. You would know it when you had it. So our ACV could be low and I could build a big business. So that's how that's how all the tractions happen. I have less than 1% ACV in the first year, mostly independents, and we're booking millions and millions of cans sold. So, but the way I went about it is product philosophy, market philosophy, crowded market of people that are not that passionate. And that I felt that there's a very good chance that with my business experience, dual market threat ability to build a business, hire the best people, that I could actually displace and disrupt the top three, or at least two of the top four brands, and do it in actually a relatively quick period of time. So went and to be able to have the aspirations to do what I did, I needed to believe in myself and put the cart before the horse, if you will. So if you really believe, if there's a real belief system, like when I laid down the book of the China study to save my daughter Kate, if there's real belief system that I know the product to build, and I know there was an opening in DSD because Celsius went to Pepsi, KDP went C4. And for the first time in a long time, contracts for DSD were open in there. And I had the product market fit, because the way I do it is I sit with my product with 100 stores. I don't call investors. I call nobody. I don't want any employees, want nobody. And I sit there for hours a day with those 100 stores. I put them in bowling alleys. I put them over here. I put them there. And I let the customer tell me. And I knew when everywhere I put it, it sold. Didn't matter if I put it in a gas station, C-store, Sprouts, wherever I put it. I had someone help me put it in the store. It sold. With Kate Farms, I had to put it in like a natural setting. That was it, right? That's all I could sell until I went to medical. So I knew right away I had that going. So now the next thing I had to do was have a thesis. And the thesis was that that we are going to build a superior gross margin product that is going to make you feel euphoric. And I'm going to go grab territory with with an incredible team. And I'm going to be one of the fastest growing companies to $100 million. So I don't do what a lot of people do. I don't start a business and see how it goes. I start with the end, because if I start with the end of where I'm going, and I want to create a $1 billion business, then what would you do early on if you were creating a $1 billion business? You would hire the best artists. You would hire the best formulators to work with you. you would sit down for hours and try to convince the best employees to join the cause early. And what I do is I work backwards from that. So what's really weird about this, everything I did in December 2023 when I signed Imaginary as my first investor till today, 95, 100% has gone to plan, because I kind of, it's all engineered. It looks like it's sort of, we're throwing commercials out there and doing wild things, but it's absolutely, I know within 2 quarters when I'm going to go profitable in this company.
What's your approach to hiring top talent?
If you hire the very best in the world, it's very hard to do. Then you won't need to micromanage them. If you hire the best, if you are a guy that thinks you're an A player and you think you're the best at all these different departments, subconsciously, I believe you will sort of want to do everything to protect decision making around you being the big genius founder, CEO. And I think this is where founders make the biggest, and CEOs mistake. You will get credit for who you are and what you've done by having the maturity to make sure you're trying to hire the very best people. And let me give you an example. They came to Henry Ford when he was launching his second car, and they said, Henry, how could a guy like you don't know how to build anything, you don't have any engineering experience, you don't know how to do anything in the company, you don't have marketing, you have no personality, you don't have any, like, you can barely sell to investors for he said, under my desk, I have 33 buttons, and I can press the buttons to any one of these people and get the best people in the world. The best founders and entrepreneurs have some ability to attract the best to their team to do it. And the sake of your enterprise has to happen. You need to be able to do that.
How have you been able to do that?
I think that my reputation probably preceded itself with K Farms, and then I was able to solve such a complex network of problems. I think my ability to capital raise, no one wants to join a startup with a founder that can't succinctly really give confidence to investors to make sure that like, you've got to really believe that there's a road to the future. And I think the next part about it is the ability to tell people that I'm going to allow you to have so much fun and build what you want to build here. Allow them to make mistakes and fall on their face. And I think that people that have really kind of done diligence on me is that if I think that you love power for power's sake, you're gonna have a problem with me. Like, I'm not gonna do well with you. But if you just love to bring the best people around you, and you love to work for the company, and there's no agenda other than building beautiful things, and you build a network of trust around you, I think I'm a really good person to work for. And so I think just instilling that confidence, because the most talented people in the world, what they want to know is that you're not going to go bankrupt with your burn, right? Energy drinks, in particular, in beverage, need to be run by a person that understands how to get the money and why you need to burn and when you're going to turn off the jet engines of that burn, and give job security to everyone and confidence that you're going to be able to get that done. And that, my friend, was built on day one. Like, all that was built first day before I sold a drink.
Beverage, very well known. It's a very capital intensive business, right? Like, beverage, it's heavy. This is, I think, my opinion, part of the reason why you have a lot of companies that don't launch as beverages, but you have, a lot of powders, for example, just because beverage is just so freaking hard on its own. Well, first of all, when you're approaching retail, what got them interested in Lucky? Obviously, you have this great track record of Kate Farms, but what about Lucky? What about Lucky themselves did they think, hey, we're gonna give you all a shot?
When the draft comes, everyone thinks they know who's going to be the next great person or next great quarterback, and they can measure everything, but you can't measure that special quality, that what I call an intangible of an athlete. A lot of times the great high school stars don't go on to be great, and same in business. It's not the words you say, it's sort of some intangible of what allows you to grab all of your partners to join the cause. It, and that's why I've probably started very few businesses, because I won't start it. I'll bring myself to an edge. I won't start it unless I really know, like there's a conviction inside that. And so there's a coalescence of a lot of things happening with Lucky. Number one, you got a unique founder story. Never since Paul Newman's has there ever been a true life story told through a CPG product. Twice, daughter, now it's the dad, right? So that's interesting. That's differentiated. We have product differentiation. It's not just another energy drink. It's different. It's less ingredients is more. It's cleaner. No aftertaste is the claim. We think we delivered on all that. And the name. The name went from very risk averse to one of the greatest names ever. Like, have you ever met 8 billion people on planet Earth? We all have one thing in common. We all want to be lucky. So we jump from the shelf. People give us a shot. Now, if the product's great, which the retailer, then you get repeat customers. To give you sort of why I'm so excited about Lucky right now, and we just got back 2 days ago that are on our digital Amazon and D2C, we had a 52% 90-day rolling repeat purchase from 1 to 3, which is unheard of. Like premium is 30 to 40, elite of elite is 40. We just had a 52%. And we products part of it, but also we're investing heavily in the entertainment part of our business. We're trying to connect with the consumer through an authentic story, make them laugh, cry, mischief, mayhem. You never know what's going to come. And the overriding story is that we're not ticking the box in marketing. We're young people are disenfranchised, they're upset, and they love authenticity. And so I think the buyers are the same way. We're standing out different from everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly has kind of an anti-brand or like punk rock energy when you see on the social accounts. How as well when it comes to marketing, how do you think about the different entertainment channels they actually want to engage in? Obviously, there's organic social, but does it make sense, for example, to even look at sports or other channels that might be a really great introduction for people to Lucky?
There's a duality to our business, right? It's like there's this carefree artist that's going to say what he wants to say to represent the human experience, which is wild, up and downs and make you laugh, make you cry, outrageous content. But then there's a brand halo of our brand, which is our first thing was to get eyeballs we brought the marketer, the first employee from Liquid Death over to sort of get a lot of traction. We have 400,000 followers on TikTok almost, and I think almost a 500,000 total in social. We had like 2,000 in June, right? So brand last year, and the brands just exploded. But 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 I but the way we see it is we want to our heroes are the flawed, the broken, the comeback stories. So when we sign an athlete, we want to know, like, it's not about the tattoo, but we want to make sure you're not hurting people or whatever. Or you could be Tiger Woods, but if you're a bad character, we don't you could be the greatest athlete in the world, but we want to know your heart, who you are. And we love the comeback story. So when we look to our like we signed Butterbean, like a 90s fighter, to make a comeback in fighting. Like, it sounds crazy, but he really wants to fight. Like, that's important. A comeback of a 58-year-old fighter who says those guys are all fake. I want a title shot back, and we're going to call out Jake Paul or one of those guys. But or we look at Pharaoh Brown. He broke his leg in the college game, Oregon Ducks, and he almost had his leg amputated by doctors, and NFL said he could never come back and play. And he was a walk-on, and now he's playing for the Miami Dolphins. Or another great kid is Tommy DeVita from the New York Giants. I just signed him. Flashy kid, but his heart is gold. Such a good kid. Such amazing story of walking on and capturing New York hearts. But those are our Rorys or Tiger Woods for us, and we want to. As we move to the future of possible Super Bowl commercials, the halo of the brand is to tell a story of, let's accept each other and let's bring the high school cafeteria together, of the jock, the nerd thing, and let's stop judging, and let's just we're spinning on this rock in this flawed experience called life, and we're all doing the best we can.
How did you approach and think about pricing as well? Because obviously it's a clean product as well. I know that you're very focused, obviously, on the gross margin as well, and making sure you have great, obviously being very very healthy on that front. Within the competitive set, how did you think about price, and also how did you think about different distribution channels that you wanted to get into? I believe now you're at 10,000 stores, if that's somewhat accurate. How did you think about, like, which types of, r retailers you actually wanted to be in?
Yeah, so it started off with going deep into territories, right? So no billion-dollar brand has ever exited, really. This is going to be a stunning stat. Unless you win Polar and Big Geyser, and Big Geyser is got three energy brands. C4, there's 200 energy brands in the world. C4, they've got Celsius and they got Lucky. So when I knew I had to win the pillars, so I was looking to get to them early with my data, and so just the knowledge of understanding that you got to win the Northeast because the rest of the country will sort of fall from that. You got to win the Northeast, and we went C store. C store is $14 billion in consumers. Large formats 8 billion. And we wanted to win the C store in 2024, 2025. We hit Albertsons in large format. We'll explore. We thought that our demo was going to be 90% male, 10% women. It's actually almost 40% women in a large can, which shocked us a bit. So we will look to try to get into the hearts and minds of consumers at concerts and stuff and culture that we'll look to get out in this summer into a lot of concert series. Probably look to move into a 12-ounce sleek for women at some point, compete with Alani News and Celsius is the world that we believe we've got something clean. We've got something pretty clean. So, and then of course, at some point late in 2026, we'll start testing, or late 2000, pardon me, 2020, we'll start testing club, and stuff like that. But really, our focus right now is the gym business. We have a beta alanine, which is a pre-workout. I dosed it down so you don't get the tingles. So gym business, C store, 7-Eleven right now we're with, and Quick Trip, and we're exploding with Circle K. But yeah, but we just started our retail footprint. So next year we'll be in about 30 to 40,000 doors next year. And march towards 100 million, right?
That's fantastic. Recently, you raised your Series A1, led by Mavron. Congratulations. We've had a couple Mavron investors on the show. First, why raise the Series A1 now? And also, what resonated with investors the most for Lucky?
My ability to build the team resonated. I would say that was the most powerful component. Usually a brand kind of putzes along, product market fit. If you hit fire like a Olipop or something like that, and you start working on these things. Like I worked on all these things that you usually see in a year three brand, gross margin, like I can prepare and get this company ready for dual path, like in the next 2 years. So there's things I've done just as a beverage expert that you don't see a lot. And I'm really happy that I've made those promises happen. But yeah, I think that what's really is building the team. And then the real idea that I've been thoughtful to a data science about how we're going to grab territory, win the hearts and minds of the people, and turn on profitability. And a belief that I'm going to do that, like engineered real belief to the investors. I think that gives comfort that, yeah, we're going to be, we're an energy. We need to get out there and do what we're doing. But like this is not going to be a company that's limping around with 30 margins trying to find an exit. We will find that place. So all those things are in place. The great thing about Mavron was we had several lead investors that wanted to be with us, but Mavron was such a conservative firm. And when they spent time with me, Dan flew out to my house and spent time with my wife, Dan Leviton, just got to know why I was doing it, who I was. Like the questions were so deep. There was so much diligence on me, talking to my board, talking to my best friends. really getting to know who I was and why I did things. And I think the term maverick is probably a little bit of how I go. I go for it, right? But having the vote of confidence from Mavron, Jason Stoffer over there, they were behind Starbucks going public, and also Dan bringing on his best friend Dan Ginsburg from Red Bull, the ex CEO of Red Bull, was big because he approached him on several dozen portfolio companies, and he didn't have an interest. So Dan Ginsburg, brought Red Bull from 75 million to a billion six in revenue in 6 years. So we're talking about a pretty serious guy. And so, yeah, I just think it just building the right people around me.
What have you learned most from Ginsburg thus far?
Go deep into these territories. You know, um, what I've learned from Dan and very high. They love the idea that we're looking for high character people. That you could be the most talented person in the world, but if you're low character, it's not a good place for Lucky. If you're low character, I mean, if you're high character and you're a low performer, we can always teach you how to be a high performer. We really believe in that. Um, so the alignment on those values are very, very important. Um, I think from Dan is Ginsburg was to go deep and to I think he's a big believer in the fact that a lot of companies don't professionalize themselves early enough to be able to take advantage of potentially, let's say you're sitting around like on a dance floor waiting for the girl to come to ask you to dance. That's kind of what the acquisition game seems to be sometimes. But having a company that's a dual threat process um, if you can, is a really great idea to build because the favors in the strategics corner. And a lot of these liquor companies are not doing well, in beer companies, they're going to be looking for an energy drink. But having the company ready to, if we're going to be a world beater, we don't know quite yet. But if we're going to be a world beater, the fact that I'll be ready and these guys know how to help me how to do that is just crazy great for me.
How overall, I'm just thinking about energy drink and and especially Red Bull, and marketing and how Red Bull spends a lot of money on marketing. Energy drinks in general, I'd imagine, would have to spend a lot of money on marketing because, or sponsorships, partnerships, stunts, because they're kind of they're creating this really unique experiences for the consumers. I'm a big Red Bull fan in terms of what they've done. How do you think, as an emerging brand, how do you think about marketing spend and where did it actually make sense? Because imagine in energy, you probably have a lot more of percentage of sales devoted to marketing, maybe more toward in comparison to other categories.
The MER, the ROAS, the the way the consumer adoption, it sort of tells if your marketing is working or not, right? So um, you start off with a big idea. I always start off with very simple big ideas, which is, you know, 50% of the world, if you will, want coffee. 50% of the world hate coffee and they want energy drinks. So it's a massive daily consumption that's never ending. And now that they've gone to zero sugar in low sugar products, the consumer, without sacrificing taste, the consumer feels really, really, the category is not going, it's growing unbelievably fast. So the way I think of marketing is that you're either good at it or you're not. I mean, I think um, you need eyeballs to the marketing. I think the old days of just taking out a billboard or getting a NASCAR race team or whatever, I think is not necessarily as effective as winning the hearts and minds, getting in the experiential, like for instance at the U.S. Open, getting having we had all the coaches wearing. We couldn't afford the players, but I got all the coaches wearing Lucky gear all last U.S. Open. So I go to this. I think of ways of marketing in secondary ways. Um, we went out to the golf event out in Scottsdale, that crazy one before the Masters.
Yeah. Yeah.
and we were out there, with lucky stuff and lucky readings and stuff. The way I look at marketing is we're in a world of, um, you know, TikTok is obviously our dominant. Our We didn't really think it was going to be that, but we're one of the top selling brands on TikTok. We're, if you will, primarily a TikTok marketing brand for digital. Um, and we're always looking for secondary, um, memorable opportunities to connect with the young generation as they shift preferences, from legacy brands that may have captured their attention for a short period of time, and it's up for grabs for them. And what we want to do is tap into the belief that we're giving a cleaner beverage, and that we're giving content in a way that entertains them, as they like to be entertained.
That makes sense. I'd imagine also just in today's world, you can do a lot more for less, I would think, just because of organic social, to be honest with you.
Well, that's
And,
it. Well, that's it right there. Is that
you know,
it starts off as these huge sort of, now we have these email lists that are just massive, and we introduce a flavor and it just goes crazy. Son of a Peach is our latest flavor, and Risberry. And we start off with higher dollar marketing items to tell the story, and now the shareable content's out there, and it's just sort of, it is a lower cost thing, but the prize is pretty big. And the model is can allow us, as long as we're grabbing territory, grabbing share, and also grabbing, repeat customers at such a high rate, then you need to pour gasoline on it. Um, and then you can always, here's another thing: our margin is crazy. It's 54%, which is high, but we also have a 26 trade spend this year. And so people that know this business know that when you get down to a scaled beverage, you're probably down to a 17, 18 trade. I mean, some soda companies that I want to mention, they were 13, 14. So we have wiggle room to get in the 60s. And that's really exciting for investors.
would the poppy sale and, the Olipop fundraise, predominantly actually like the poppy sale, does that, because there really hasn't been that much strategic kind of, it's been a bit of a lull per se when it comes to strategics. Did that give you some confidence?
No, it did the opposite. For me, it these are unbelievable companies in culture. And I don't think the prices were that great, right? I mean, if you look at Body Armor, I think they exited at 6, 7, $8 billion, right? Something crazy like that. Vitamin Water, 3.5 billion. Um, I think when you get too big, you get so big, you need to make sure you're going where if you go into the public markets, that you've got 5 years of double growth. You've got this great growth story ahead of you that just not going to be disrupted, whether you've launched some items to be contribution margin, digitally, that are a little cheaper to ship because they're lower weight, et cetera. We have plans for all that. Can't tell too much, but, um, I think the best analogy, I'm big on analogies, is that it's like sitting on a dance floor and you're waiting for everyone to come acquire you. That's not leverage. Leverage is when you've inspired the world and you think you could become a world beater, and you think your story has a lot of heart and soul to it. And if the price is right, you'll stay private, but you will go if it's a bad situation for investors. So I think that they've had the advantage. Um, I think some of them have seen the big acquisition prices, and perhaps the founders have gone, and these companies don't sizzle as way they used to. Um, but I'm not impressed with all the M&A activity at all. I think it's actually, I think it's good, but I think, it strengthens my idea that I should be building a dual path company here.
Got it. So that might be, um, then you might be thinking, okay, if these are the prices that, strategics are willing to pay for what are, generational companies, then it might make more sense to stay independent or go kind of more the IPO route, if that makes sense.
100%. Like I'd love to say, God, I know what's going to be required. I know all this different stuff, but this is about the possibility of a tremendous outcome at Cape Farms. I called it the summer of love. Oatly and Beyond Meat had gone public in 2021 when Oatly went. It was just astronomical. I wasn't the CEO, but we didn't, at the time, we didn't have our audits done, so we couldn't go. So like I think that if you really have the ability to go be a world beater, you're doing yourself justice by at least giving yourself that option. I think there's a lot of hunger for the alcohol companies to need to take a position with a great company that's going to be a world beater. That's probably the next. The top three have taken their positions. They'll probably be hungry for more. But Lucky, the symbol sounds pretty good. LUCK.
What's been harder, building a brand for hospitals and healthcare or building one for mass retail?
Once you've broken down, which takes many more years, many more in the hospital, you've broken into the system. You kind of own your customer. They love you. And you almost don't become a plant-based company. You become a superior nutrition company that's loved by many, and being disrupted there is highly unlikely. But to do that is one in a gazillion chance to break in the medical industry. So that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Creating a formula shelf stable, you never have to eat again. I mean, I don't know how I'm alive. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But doing what I'm doing, it takes a different type of thing. It takes such an ability. What I told you earlier, an intangible that, like, who's going to be the Tom Brady? Who are you handicapping? Must be very hard for venture capital firms. It's an incredible odyssey to be able to put together all the ingredients to become loved by consumers. So, all in all, medical's harder.
Good to know. Well, Richard, thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, and hey, if you ever want to get an update or come back, and I've really had a good time, or more other topics that you wanted that we didn't get to, I'm glad to be here, and really it's a privilege for you to bring me on. Thank you.
Would love that. Would love to do an update. Richard, thanks again. And if you're ever in LA, I also do play tennis. I know that you were also a pro. I'm not nearly as good as you, but would love to play.
You know what? Don't offer, because coffee and tennis, I'll do it, buddy. I'm gonna look you up.
Oh my God. Well, you're gonna kill me, but I'd love it.
Let's do it.
Much,
all
Richard.
right.
Yeah.
Say thanks to all your listeners.
And there you have it. Richard, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast and spending time with me. Thank you to Highbeam, our presenting sponsor. And if you're loving the show, please subscribe to the newsletter at theconsumervc.com. You won't be sorry. Until next time.